Well, hello. We are back again with the We Over Me podcast. This is Tiffany Egger, and I work at Teammates National Office as a regional coordinator. I serve our North Central region, which is about 24 chapters in the rural part of Nebraska. I've been in this role for just over a year now, and in joining me is Allyson Horne. She is our engagement director with the national office, and she comes from a lot of different backgrounds and expertise. If you kind of want to share a little bit about your story with teammates.
I will gladly. When Tiffany talks about her region, that's one of my favorite places to be. I try not to play favorites, but I do love spending time with Tiffany and the group in her region. I've been with Teammates as a mentor since 1999. I'm still learning how to be a good mentor. I'm still learning how to implement strengths learning into my life, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But I came into Teammates as a mentor first, and then as a program coordinator. And at the same time I was becoming and learning the role of program coordinator, I became a Teammates parent. And that's probably one of my favorite roles. I know that a lot of listeners heard our first podcast about strengths regarding strengths as a core value for teammates and really how we implement it as an organization. And today we're going to have a lot of fun talking about executing domains, which I have few strengths that land in the executing domain, but I do get things done remarkably. And when I think about the things that I've been able to do through teammates, it's been through building relationships that I think I've been able to help build some strategy and build some best practices. But been on board with the central office, national office since 2009. So I'm coming up on 48, Tiffany. I feel very seasoned. That's the word I like to use, like smoked paprika. I'm feeling very
Oh,
seasoned in my role with teammates, in the sense of being the one that can find that email from 2010 if you need it. That's where I lead with input. I can share some stories when it comes to my high communication. And with my strategic, I like to think about where we're headed next and how we might find a better path. And then I have woo and empathy, which are my social superpowers and human connection strengths. And so it's really fun to be here with you, Tiffany. You should tell our listeners your top five too.
yes, I'd be happy to. So, yeah, I lead with belief, relator, arranger, responsibility, and includer. So, since we are talking about the executing domain, I do have just a couple up there in my top five, three of them. But again, leaning into some relationship building in there as well. So yeah, it's really kind of cool to see how the mixes can present differently. Like I know Allyson, I lean on it a lot with you with your input and your strategic thinking, and you help me create that list of okay, how do I get this done? So I appreciate that complementary partnership there.
I love that we're starting to talk about the domains. So years ago, when I went back to school and got my certification in Gallup-Strengths, and Tiffany just recently got her coaching certification in Gallup-Strengths. When I was first learning back in 2009, we didn't have these four domains weren't yet identified, and that's been something that Gallup has really enhanced in strengths learning. They can put each of those 34 amazing themes that came from those words that describe the best of you, came from many, many, many dialogues that Don Clifton had with people years ago around how they felt successful. And it was really around performance. And so, what better way for us to introduce and talk about the four domains than to start with executing, because that's really about how we get things done. But they put the 34 themes into four domains: executing, strategic thinking, influencing, and relationship building. And so if you've taken your Gallup strengths and you've learned about them, you may know about where you are strong in certain domains. But one of the important pieces to that, I think I could make a case for each of the 34 to be an executing theme, a strategic thinking theme, an influencing theme, a relationship building theme. So I don't get too hung up on the categories of the domains, but what it helps me better understand is the approach I do take to getting things done, or the approach that other people take to influencing, or the approach that other people take to building relationships or building strategy. And it helps me think about complementary partners who are all across my life. When we talk about teams, and Tiffany and I'll talk about the teammates team here in a bit, I think teams is a very holistic term. I'm part of many teams. I'm one of many siblings, and that's a team that I'm part of. I'm a part of my family with my adult kiddos and their dad. That's part of a team for me, or a team that I'm part of. And of course, the teammates team, that's very near and dear to me. So when I think about all these 34 themes in the different domains, it helps me also think about the natural occurrence of complementary partners all throughout my life. People who naturally do things that may require a little bit more effort and energy from me or for me. So when I think about executing themes, I think about themes like achiever, and I think about themes like responsibility, and I think about some of those themes that help people just get things done. It doesn't mean that I don't get things done, but the way that I go about getting things done is a little bit different than my colleague Des Moines, or my friend and colleague Tiffany, who's on the call with me today. If you think about the likelihood of Tiffany and I having the same top 5 strengths in order, according to Gallup's analytics, it's 1 in 33 million. And I had kind of an epiphany about this the other day, because I don't have high executing themes. I have high relationship building and influencing themes. I was thinking about how I'm the worst person to send to the grocery store, but I'm the best at the dinner time conversation. So as a gifted coach that you are, Tiffany, when you think about how I just explained that, think about my top 5 strengths: input, communication, strategic, woo, and empathy. And as a coach, how would you see those showing up for me?
I think that really you're the one who's this is the event, and where and how. Maybe getting to the how part would be where you really do lean into those partners that you have identified, and asking for help, or who wants to bring the chips or who wants to bring the meat, kind of delegating that out. I could see you doing that really, really well with your communication, your strategic, really absorbing other people's input too, and hearing what they'd be offering. Whereas I know with me, and this is even with my includer too, my relator, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get everything done. And I just want them to show up and be. And like, even going through that list of getting things done, that's part of the gratification for me, is because I like to have the party done and then get to party with people and actually be in that moment. So we would do that very differently, but it doesn't mean that the get together isn't going to be brilliant. It's just the way we get to that event.
I think that's a beautiful illustration, a simple but beautiful illustration of the domains. So when we think about executing, influencing, strategic thinking, and relationship building, there are those unique strengths that lie within those domains. Gallup has a lot of resources around that. I think one of the cool things that we'll be able to do as we release this podcast is share with you some of the resources that Gallup provides. We are certainly not experts on the 4 domains, but Tiffany and I both work in a space where we have a high executing team. So if the Teammates National Office was a person, they would lead with responsibility with as an high executing theme. They also have high achiever. We have a lot of executing themes in the team's overall top 5. So when I think about that as part of my job as director of engagement, and my primary focus is on this national office team, I think about some of the ways that there's beauty and essence in the executing. This is a team that you can count on. This is a team that's going to get things done. This is a team that's going to take psychological ownership with that high responsibility of what they say they're going to do. They're going to do what they say they're going to do. And as a result, they're good at building trust. Now, when you think about building trust, you probably think about that through the lens of relationship building, but it's actually in their execution that they're building trust. It's in the actions that they provide that backs up the words about what they say they're going to do. And so when you think about the beauty and the essence of executing themes, and Tiffany, I want you to chime in here too.
Yeah.
I think about some of that get things done sort of mentality, providing psychological safety to a team when you come in and know that you have a team that's high executing. I like to share with people that I believe the world is one big group project. But when I think back to college, my years at Doane, when I had a professor say, and 40% of your grade at the end of this semester will be based on this group project. I started scanning the room for people who were not like me,
Yes.
people who were going to get things done, people who were going to show up early, people who were going to be someone that I could count on. Because you can about imagine me, Tiffany, in a group project. I'm pretty social.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily showing up to get things done. I'm maybe showing up to meet new people or to be able to feel part of something social. Humans give me energy, but I don't necessarily bring the same sort of strength set to a group project. And again, back to that 1 in 33 million unique, that
Right.
means that you and I showing up for a group project are going to bring a very different skill set.
And it reminds me of our whole office. You know, when we did take a Q12 that I was a part of here recently, and I loved hearing that. Was it about 85% of us
89,
reported 89 that
89.
we reported feeling connected with our mission? And I think that also speaks on behalf of a high presence and essence of that executing theme, is that mission drive, that connectedness to what it is we're doing in our roles and in our jobs. And when I heard that, it made perfect sense to me, because we are driven by what we're doing. And if what we're doing is connecting with us, and I have high belief, which is an executing thing, but if I believe in the mission, the doing part actually is easy. And it comes naturally for me, because it coincides with what I want to do.
Tiffany, I want to go a little further on your belief strength, that being your number one, and it is an executing theme by Gallup's measurements. It's also one of Coach Osborne's top 5 strengths. And when I think
Yeah.
about, who we are as an organization, and I think about our core values, and I think about integrity, what better example of that strength in
Right.
action than really the way that Coach Osborne has lived, but also the mission, vision, values of teammates. It's your number one as well. And so I wondered if you would share with our listeners a little bit about what belief looks like in action, because I think for some of us, it may look more like a relationship building theme because you do have those strong core values. It may even look like an influencing theme
Mm-hmm.
because you help people stay in alignment with mission, vision, values. So tell us from your perspective and the beauty of your talent, how belief is an executing theme for you.
Yeah, and this one took me probably the longest to come to full terms with. Once I got it, it was like this beautiful light bulb that went off in my head and was like, oh, I get it now. So belief for me really does set almost that core value for me. Is I love to work in a capacity of helping others. I love working with others that are going towards a better tomorrow or a greater good, serving a better purpose. That is really what drives me. And so with teammates, where our mission is being a part of a young person's life and helping them reach their full potential, that connection for me was instant. And then that belief in that mission is easy, it's seamless. And it's basically why I say it all the time. I love my job. I love what I get to do. And it's because it really does relate to my driver. And I speak to my driver as just being that motivation and feeling that I'm actually serving in a position to doing my best version of good. And it's personal to everybody. Everybody has their separate take as to what that driver is, what that motivation is, what that mission is. But for me, when I came onto teammates and I realized, and I've been with teammates for 10 years. I've been a mentor for 10 years now this year, which is super exciting. I haven't made that connection until 9 years later and actually figured that out for myself. So it was one of those where it really took, in Allyson, a conversation with you and kind of hearing it in a different perspective really made that connection for me.
Well, there's a bunch of things that you said that I really want to highlight here. The phrase "my driver." I would love for listeners who, are maybe just joining us to know and understand that you don't have to know your Gallup top 5 strengths to know some of your superpowers and to name some of your talent. What are some of those catchphrases that you use? You just said one, my driver. That is completely a beautiful example and out loud illustration of belief. And then I'm so lucky. I love what I get to do. So it's not what I have to do, or it's not a
Yes.
task that's in front of me. It's what I get to do. And then the phrase seamless. I just think that's such a beautiful example of belief as an executing theme. There's like connection to, and you have high connectedness as well, right?
It's not even in my top 10, which is
Oh, it's
shocking.
not.
I
But
know.
I hear it sometimes from you, but it doesn't mean that you
Yes.
can't reach down and find it. But it may be in that high belief, that connection to the greater good, which I think is so clear. Also, you're a ranger. I
Yes.
hear often in how articulate you are at sharing how you got to today, the 10 years that you've been part of, being a mentor and that high belief. I also want to go back to what you mentioned about Q12, and it just dawned on me. We celebrated that we have 89% engagement, which we're very proud of. But another statistic that I shared with our board was we had 100% participation in the Q12 survey within 7 days. And when I think about our team being a high executing theme, of course that makes sense, because this is a team
Yes.
that's going to get it done, and they're going to get it done well. And I think that's some of the beauty and the essence of a high executing team. We do want to mention, because it's important to think about, what's some of the watch outs for a high executing team. So, Tiffany, before I share some of my observations or some of my work with high executing teams, you have high executing themes. So, from your perspective, what are some watch outs for you when it comes to having those those are right there in your toolkit? You're not even having to dig for those tools, they are like breathing for you. So, what are some watch outs?
It brought me back to your perspective on if you were asked to do a team project in class. That for me is a watch out because a team can sometimes be very difficult to navigate. You don't know who the leader is, you don't know who's going to show up, you don't know. And delegating out some of those responsibilities for people with high executing themes is hard because then you're having to trust them to do the quality of work that I guess you would expect. And that is very difficult. I feel like if you have high executing themes, you work within a team, but you have your bubble and you know your bubble, you're good at your bubble, you know how you do things and you love that, you appreciate that. Sometimes I think we get stuck in that way of doing without
Sure.
asking or receiving input or help or a new perspective. It's kind of, I want to say it's like tunnel vision sometimes where we might all be reaching for the same goal and we're all doing it so differently and so beautifully, but we're not seeing it because we're not really being trying to be a part of it. That is one thing I've noticed as a watch out is being
Mhm.
more open and hearing and seeing and letting myself process how others do.
Mm.
That's been really, really good for me to do. The
And
other
that,
thing is knowing when to shut down the list and
mm,
when to call it a good, successful day and be ready to turn the page to tomorrow.
mhm.
And allowing myself that break because that is very hard for high executing things too, is really taking that time away from constantly doing.
And you are spot on with,
Yeah.
I think, recognizing the watch outs of a high executing team. The head down mentality. I've got work to do. I need to get it done. Silos sometimes happen when we have a high executing team because collaboration is hard when, if we have high responsibility, we take that on. There's a really funny Saturday Night Live skit with Jimmy Fallon. So it's pretty old. Again, I'm dating myself here a little bit, but when Jimmy Fallon was still on Saturday Night Live,
Yes.
he's the IT guy. And so the skit kind of goes, here's somebody like Allyson who doesn't know how to run the technology. And so I call IT and here comes Jimmy. His character is the IT guy. And he sits down next to me and he's just so frustrated watching my fingers on the keys or hearing me describe the problem that he simply just says, move. Like, get out of the way and let me do it.
Yeah.
And I think about that because it's brought in a fun light, the IT guy that's just like, get out of my way, I'll do it. But a real watch out for a high executing team is collaboration and also being able to trust that when we are gifting assignments to others, that we can watch and witness. I love what you said, how others do.
Yeah.
We can't take it all on. We can't do everything. And with a high achieving team as well, work life balance is really difficult. I also want to go back to a team that has high belief or a team that's very mission focused. When we think about work life balance, we don't have a line because our work is our life and our life is our work. So I don't even like to use that phrase work-life balance with anyone on our teams, but also for myself, because I
Mhm.
am very mission driven. When I think about how I go about getting things done through those relationships and that influencing, it always comes back to here. And so for me to just take a rest or take a day, I love that you spoke to that, that it's hard. Even if we don't have high executing themes, it's hard sometimes to turn the screens off and to take a step back. Tiffany, I know that you have some really good best practices for reset when it comes to your strengths, and I think that's an important concept that our listeners, they'll be hearing consistently on We Over Me when it comes to the different domain conversations. I hope to be present on all of those calls. So I'll be reminding people how important it is to have
Yeah.
your own best practices for reset and recovery. Would you share some of the things that you do to put your executing themes back into a place of productivity, maybe after they've been overused or over indexed?
Yeah, and I was in the process of developing this year. And it is. There's a lot of reasons why, but I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling overexerted. And so in kind of finding out where do I reconnect with the mission, or how do I, is pretty much I do have relator as number two. My closest people are my people, and they build me back up. They let me kind of just be free without having to have a list or having to have an agenda, and they're just present in that moment. And for me, that's huge, because that is my recharge. That is my connection back to what it is that I'm doing and why I do it. So being with my closest people is one of the ways that I do recharge. And then also is just a day not in front of the computer. I do love to read, and I've really been diving into like a lot of different books about strengths, but also about well-being. If you're high in executing, it's saying make your personal list, make your well-being list. What is it are the things that you need to do to help yourself recharge, and to give yourself that time for you, and make it be a part of your everyday agenda. That works for me, is if I do set aside that time. Okay, this is Tiffany's time. What does Tiffany need to do with her time today? Does she need to call her best friend? Or does she need to grab the book off the wall and sit down and read for a good hour or two, just to give herself that break? I would say I do feel like I have to schedule that in to make sure
Right.
it happens. But making it a priority really does allow me to take it.
That's brilliant. A well-being list is
Yeah.
honoring to your high executing themes. It's a to-do list, so it's going to feel like execution. Sometimes I think being is really hard for those who have high executing because it's in the doing. But when you assign the being as a doing checklist, it seems to flow better. And I know organizationally, one of the things that we've done as a team is tried to build in accountability partners with one another. So having those people that will hold us accountable for what we say we're going to do. And that may mean that we need an accountability partner to our well-being list, and to honoring that space and time on the calendar that really helps us get recentered. If we are not in a place of productivity or in flow, or what I like to say, balance with our strengths, if they are over indexed, overused, or if we're tired or hungry or stressed, our strengths can actually show up as lesser talents because they're not being utilized in a positive productivity role. And I think that's an important thing to think about as we dive into the four domains. I also think it's great homework. I was starting out with just one piece of homework, but now I'm adding two, of course.
Yeah.
To think about, how do you reset? How do you do your own well-being check-in when it comes to your pathway? May be very different than Tiffany's. My well-being reset is in nature, and I have to do that for the most part by myself. I need to be in quiet, even though I have, you know, that social need and that energy from being around people. For me to do a reset, it needs to get into solitude and recenter. So a great question, homework question for our listeners would be, how do you do a well-being check-in for yourself? And then I'm really excited to ask people to contemplate whether you know your Gallup strengths or not. I think each of us knows we have unique superpowers. So think about how your strengths or your superpowers help you get things done. And Tiffany, I'll ask you as you wrap us up, think about how your strengths contribute to getting things done. My input helps me gather the information in order to execute. I have to have the information. I have to ask all my questions first before I can go forward. My communication helps me know the story and understand the pathway to the task at hand. I also know that I'll feel a sense of accomplishment when I know something lands here and creates a story or reignites a story for someone else. And my strategic thinks about, okay, what are the pathways now that we have to do in order to get more done? And then I think my woo helps me think about how I can help other people get things done or move other people towards action. And then my empathy just totally gets in the space of understanding why someone might need an accountability partner or might need a gentle nudge to be reminded that they are doing everything in their own way to get to that gold star or that check off the list.
I gotta say too, Allison, you're kind of in the perfect place because with your superpowers, you're accountable for pretty much our whole national office team that then is accountable for our whole program. So to know that we have that support from you, even the homeworks, the get-togethers and the listening of, and you always making this a part of our culture and of our conversations. That's your woo, that's your communication, that's your empathy, that's your you're using all of those and the input of information that you have just blows my mind all the time. It just, oh, I never thought of it that way. So I always appreciate your perspective and what you bring to our team with that. For the question, how do I use my executing things to, so I'll do responsibility. That is my word, that what I say I will do will get done, and it will get done the way that I would expect it to be. My belief is, again, kind of picky, but I have to connect to the mission and the what and how. And then it's really easy for me to do very quickly because again, I believe in it. I want to get it done. So that part, if it doesn't connect with that, I might have to lean into an accountability partner to remind me why. Sometimes that can be a struggle. It can be really easy or it'll take a second. My arranger is my list. It's always my agenda. It doesn't even have to be in order, just as long as it gets done and it works and it flows. That's really important to me. And I almost like it being an adaptable agenda so that as things come in during the day, it doesn't make it harder or easier. It's just, how do I make this all fit? And so I really appreciate that talent, because that seems like a pretty typical day in the life of a regional coordinator with teammates is, what information am I getting now, and how can I still make sure I'm efficiently addressing it?
Beautiful.
Yeah. In closing for today, I hope that you take away the fact that this domain is one of 4. Again, it's not concrete. It's not, you don't have this, so you can't relate to this. It's not, don't make it be a barrier. Make it help you identify with your talents in how you're productive or how you're connected to your mission or how you like to do your work. I really think making sure that seeing a lack of and seeing how it's used is really important. I might have 3 in my top 5, but I have 2 that are in my bottom 30. Mine present so differently than maybe somebody else's. And again, we're 1 in 33 million strengths in order. So I really hope out of today you connected with how this might look in your life and how you can use it to basically get things done.
Thank you so much for this,
Yes.
ladies. I just love this time and I appreciate you very much. Okay.
Thank
See you
you.
soon. Bye.
Have a great day.
If you've seen Inside Out, have you seen Inside Out?
Yeah, I love them.
Where all those little emotions are like, live little people up here in our being. That's how I want people to start seeing strengths. Like these are like actively moving around parts of you, but like drawing upon them at different times. But there's a whole field of research called internal family systems. It's really, really good around it's cognitive therapy, but it's around how we name different parts of ourselves. And I just listened to a Liz Gilbert piece where she said the most creative people in the world don't deny any parts of themselves. Like they say, okay, I have my part that struggles, that has no confidence, and I have my part that's proud. I have my part that is in flow and creativity, and I have my part that's stuck. Because you can't get rid of the parts of yourself. It's just acknowledgement of them. But she said the most creative and expansive people allow room for all their parts.
I know that alone, just even seeing the differences in the episodes that I've done so far is so cool to me, to see the way that everybody's doing it. And it shows in who they are and like how they do their work, the way that they all go about how they want to do their episode, and seeing people that you don't usually see do stuff together on a daily basis, like Faith and Michelle. I was so nervous for that episode because Faith is so bubbly. She's so extroverted. She's so like has like no fear, seems like sometimes. And Michelle, she is also hilarious, and giving her almost that space to be able to do that with Faith and feed off of each other was something that I was not expecting to go as well as it did, and just things like that.
What we just talked about here is really executing, because that reminds people that we're all in this. We're all in this strength spotting. It is not just limited to Allyson's job as director of engagement is this, Tiffany's job as a regional coordinator is this. I think it would really speak volumes to listeners and constituents to understand, no matter what you're doing or what your role is, you are a gifted strength spotter and you are contributing. But I feel like what we just talked about was the 1 in 33 million approach to getting something done. We all have the same task: do your episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's all remarkably different.
That was so fun.